Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. For those of you that haven't attended one of these sessions before, I'm David Morton and I'm a Change Management Project Officer within the Improvement Service. This webinar series is a monthly series that we run as part of our ongoing work on the Change Managers Network. I'll just very quickly go through the housekeeping and then I'll hand you over to our speaker today, Shaw Anderson. This will be a recorded session. Links on how to access the recording will be sent in a follow-up email to the session. For those of you that have questions, there should be some time at the end to pose these to Shaw. There should be a grey box on your screen, and if you could please type your questions in there, and at the end of the session I can unmute you if you have a microphone, and then you can ask directly to Shaw, and that way you get the chance to follow up your question as well. Also, if you have any problems with the quality of the webinar or any issues with viewing the webinar, then please put these in the question box as well and I will get back to you as soon as possible. So I hope you enjoy the session, and with that I'll hand over to Shaw. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Shaw Anderson speaking, Glasgow City Council. Colleagues, I'm just going to try and take us through some key principles and give you a flavour of some of the key issues that we have encountered in terms of our approach to prioritising outcomes, gaining stakeholder engagement and buy-in for our single outcome agreement, which is a 10-year agreement. And I'll put a particular emphasis on our place-based approach, which we have entitled Thriving Places, which is currently active in 3 areas of the city and is about to move from 3 to 6 and then to 9 areas. I'll also touch on, during this presentation, some of the plans and implementation plans and the mechanisms associated with those, and also I'll mention towards the end the Council's transformation strategy and how that may impact and work alongside the partnership, the Community Planning Partnership's approach to the single outcome agreement and delivery. There's no, sorry, I'm just going to move the slide on. Sorry colleagues, I'm trying to move that's it. Some of this is inevitably fairly technical, so I'm afraid it might not always sound particularly exciting when we go through some of the details, but as I say, the focus today in the next 15-20 minutes or so will be how do we come to shared agreed priorities, what was the process associated there, how do we engage with our partners, how do we secure buy-in and engagement, what does the single outcome agreement look like, how will we know and be able to measure progress against the single outcome agreement, and also touching upon the thriving places, the place-based approach, asset-based, place-based approach, which is a delivery tool for us in terms of delivering the single outcome agreement. And as I say, I'll also touch upon the transformation strategy. I remember a conversation with a fairly senior colleague in the NHS in Glasgow who came to me one day quite flustered about things and wanted a chat, and basically his problem was that he had encountered in his day-to-day agenda, he'd counted up that he actually was working against 74 priorities, 74 key priorities, and obviously when you have 74 priorities you don't really have any priorities, you have a list. So one of the things with the scale and complexity of Glasgow, one of the key issues when we were trying to develop our single outcome agreement was how to get a good and sharp focus, an agreed good and appropriate and sharp focus across all the partners for the work that we were encountering and what we were trying to undertake to improve the well-being of our citizens. And one of the things that we were complimented on in the relatively recent audit by the Accounts Commission was that we had indeed managed to identify a small number of focused priority outcomes, and I'll touch on them as the presentation continues. You'll see there just a flow chart about the process in terms of how we prioritised outcomes and some of the things that we undertook. To give some timelines associated with the graph that you have in front of you, an SOA review group comprising senior officers from across the CPP partners was convened in February 2012. The task of that review group was to oversee the development of the SOA for Glasgow, and at its first meeting some key principles were agreed for the new Glasgow SOA. These principles were, amongst other things, to identify the priorities where there was going to be added value, to identify priorities which there was shared activity and shared work underway, and where at all possible also to look at priorities which there was significant work already underway and arrangements and support structures in place. Initially, a dozen or so cross-cutting priorities were nominated by the CPP partners at the first stage, and these included alcohol, youth unemployment, prevention of homelessness, and an element of reducing offending. How were these selected? Well, they were selected by individual partners, and they were based on a review of evidence. They were also based on feedback from residents and the experience of staff represented around the table regarding the key challenges that were faced in the city. Following on from this, the work group was then convened a workshop for the Community Planning Partnership Executive Group members, and that was held in June 2012 with an objective of facilitating a discussion amongst the senior officials from the partner agencies about these priorities and the broad focus for the new SOA. The Executive Group of Community Planning was asked for a place-based element to be added to the single outcome agreement to acknowledge the continuing geographic inequalities that exist and continue to exist between communities, and more of that later, that then developed into our Thriving Places approach. The SOA review group were asked to review the recommendations and identify a process for articulating these specific outcomes and priorities for these. Further on again, some more process, but a series of workshops were held between autumn 2012 and the summer of 2013 to articulate these SOA outcomes, and they targeted members of the existing, emphasise existing thematic partnership structures related to outcomes such as youth employment partnership, alcohol and drug partnership. So we're very much trying to go with the flow and go with the grain of existing structures rather than look to invent or create new structures. Where appropriate, of course, existing structures could be tailored to meet the requirements. At this stage, 7 outcomes were identified and agreed for the Glasgow SOA for alcohol, youth employment, vulnerable people, etc. And also a series of principles were agreed for the Thriving Places initiative. Engagement and buy-in, we realised quite early that in the new world we needed to amend some of the structures and some of our governance arrangements with a view to enhancing the potential for shared decision making, making sure that that was widened out amongst elected members, community reps and all the key partners. And we hadn't actually tried to do something as dare I suggest, as radical as that in the past. This involved, in Glasgow specific terms, translating our 21 area committee structures, which are the 21 multi-member wards, and moving them from being council committee structures to being community planning structures. In the past, the monies, the small grants, £1.4 million across the city, had always been dispersed, but only elected members were entitled to vote on the disbursement of those monies. In the new structure and the new governance arrangements under the area partnership structures, everyone round the table has a say in terms of how the monies are allocated, in terms of setting the agendas, and in terms of moving things forward. So obviously we have changed the governance, and we are in the process, I do believe, of changing the culture and the behaviours at these revised structures, some of which have perhaps moved a wee bit quicker than others, but we are quite convinced that we are seeing benefit from this. We are also designing in Glasgow an approach to community budgeting, which would potentially be taken through our decentralised structures, which we would refer to as our area partnership structures at the individual ward level, and we're currently considering what approach we wish to take across the range of approaches that are available out there to what we would badge as community budgeting. Single outcome agreement, Glasgow's priorities. I'm sure these will be familiar to all of you. Alcohol, youth employment and vulnerable people with subsections of homelessness, housing need and work poverty. And also something that clearly they're under a priority, but as a delivery mechanism, the Thriving Places mechanism, and I'll touch on the Thriving Places mechanism in a moment or so. Single outcome agreement, what I've listed there on the slide in front of you is under the key headings. We've got a couple of bullet points, and these are the high level outcomes. And in each case there's an associated implementation plan and a means being developed for measuring progress against the high level outcomes that are listed underneath the banner headlines. For example, in terms of alcohol outcomes, we seek to reduce the accessibility of alcohol in communities, and we would seek to reduce the acceptability of misusing alcohol. Some of these things, just I'm sure you can envisage, are not quick fixes and will take a significant time. Just moving on to implementation plans. We have implementation plans for all the priorities. Each of the area, the sectors. We've split the city for administrative purposes and delivery purposes into three. Each of our sectors being approximate population sets of about 200,000. So we have a three-sector structure under the citywide structure for our community planning approach, and we have the Thriving Places, which, as I've said earlier, we've got 3 underway and a further 3 to come on stream soon, with a further 3 to take up to 9 already identified as being the priority areas. We'll update and evolve each of these over the next 10 years. Thriving Places, we've developed some key principles in terms of our Thriving Places approach, and that each Thriving Place will have an anchor organisation. It so happens that to date that's primarily been drawn from housing associations. Another key principle is that we build on and work with existing networks and structures where at all possible. We've also in each area appointed a community organiser who gives some kind of cohesion to the community engagement side of things, and there is of course a political lead. We also have a Thriving Places Forum which meets, I think it's quarterly from memory, which coordinates the activity of the Thriving Places across the city, and again that's chaired by a politician. Key principles underpinning the Thriving Places, local engagement, asset mapping and understanding of assets. We're very much gone down the asset-based approach. This slide now in front of you, place-based approach, as I said, that's with regard to Thriving Places, support to specific neighbourhoods and communities. We have recognised that despite the best efforts to date, that there's continued inequalities within some of our communities in Glasgow. So these are not areas that are picked because they're easy to resolve. We've identified areas which continue, despite our best efforts, to be at the wrong end of league tables. So we are targeting areas where we continue to attempt to deal with problems of inequality, be it educational attainment, equality of opportunity, a variety of things. Key principle is to try and speed up better outcomes for our residents, to be accessible to residents' views, to be responsive, to make sure that residents are able to influence and shape service provision. And as I said earlier, the neighbourhoods were identified on the basis of both needs and opportunity. We're focusing on 9 neighbourhoods over time, and the initial 3 are listed there: Gorbals, Parkhead, Kilmarnock and Rockhill, Postle Park. Key approach, some other key issues. We acknowledge that this has been a long-term approach and that the plans are there as part of a single outcome agreement, which is a 10-year plan. We are seeking to be flexible to local responses and to work more closely with communities, very much a model of co-production of services with residents, where residents see the opportunity, take the opportunity and can see the results of being able to influence service provision which should be tailored to specific local needs. So we're trying to increase social capital and empower communities. It's very much in the jargon an asset-based approach, and we're determined to make the most of all the assets, be they financial, buildings, services, local groups, social capital, the willingness of people to volunteer, local activists and activism. Key outcomes that we hope to influence in terms of change in going forward. We hope that an outcome will be that we have more resilient and sustainable communities, thriving, growing neighbourhoods where people are proud of where they live. We're hoping that things are, in terms of communities and residents and tenants that we seek to serve, that there's increased aspiration and the word I used earlier on, that there's a clear opportunity for local residents to influence local services and service provision, that services are indeed responsive to local evidence need, and obviously that involves the use of data and data sharing across the various partners. So communities seeking to work in partnership with the providers to plan, develop and commission potentially commission local services. We're looking to achieve higher levels of engagement and diversity of local residents engaged. It's terminology that I'm sure we're all familiar with, but beyond the usual suspects, to reach the silent majority is the expression, but certainly to try and get beyond a small number of people who may regularly seek to represent the community, to try and have as wide and diverse an engagement with communities as we possibly can. Identification of thriving places. How do we go about identifying thriving places? We used the indices of multiple deprivation. We tried it in with the statement of ambition for community planning, and we emphasised the importance of local data. We also did very clearly look to see where we thought there were opportunities to build on existing structures and to build on existing social capital. The identification of thriving places was perhaps less difficult than I certainly as an individual had envisaged, but perhaps, to be honest, part of that is that we're not throwing additional vast financial resources at thriving places. There's small additional amounts of resource going in terms of appointing a community organiser, but really the whole purpose or the ethos rather behind thriving places is to do more with existing resources and to be more effective and efficient in our use of resources. One of those resources, of course, being data, so better data sharing and an ability to have an evidence-based approach. Thriving places, that's just a diagram of where geographically in the city thriving places either are or are going to be. We have three sectors, as I mentioned earlier, and we've been quite deliberate to ensure that there are 3 thriving places just now, 1 in each of the 3 sectors. When we go to 6, it will be 2 in each of the 3 sectors, and when we go to 9, it will indeed also be reflected in the sector structures. There will be 3 in each of them. I can't take credit for this slide. It was one that I saw my colleague Claire Binner from the Work Scotland team use at a recent presentation that I attended, and but it just gives what I think is a very useful rationale behind the thought processes for returning to place. I won't go through that in detail, just the headings: civic rationale, social, political and economic. And I think that's a very useful diagram in terms of the rationale behind place-based approaches. The changing landscape, this is me just now beginning to wind up to an extent, but I'll touch on the transformation agenda that we're undergoing or we're working to in Glasgow, and this one, changing the landscape. We're all aware of changes in legislation, changing structures among some of the key partners, changes to Police Scotland, for example, changes in the structures of Scottish Fire and Rescue, and some of the legislation that's about to be come into effect in terms of the Community Empowerment Act. These are perhaps some of the key ones, but there's a significant changing landscape, and also there's, in terms of certainly local authorities, the financial imperative of the need to save money, and to do things more efficiently and effectively. So those issues are just there as key drivers of change, be they legislative, financial or structural, and all these will obviously impact on how we deliver the single outcome agreement. City Council's approach, there's been a transformation strategy developed. Key things in that are ongoing service reform, a refresh of our strategic plan, and out of that have been developed 3 working themes, 3 programme themes, which are listed in the slide in front of you. The strategic plan refresh in June took into consideration achievements to date, additional commitments made, financial outlook, and how to examine and an approach to examine how we best use resources. Part of that review includes 3 programme themes. The first 2 focus on internal change, with the third recognising that the Council cannot deliver in isolation, but that many different partnerships have been established with which the Council participates and sometimes leads. Under the partnership and place-based solutions, one issue draw to your attention is the Council is currently seeking to engage differently with our third sector partners, and that there's terms of reference being developed, and also we're looking at the composition of a working group with senior Council officers to work closely with senior colleagues in representing the third sector in Glasgow to look at how we can more effectively engage and work together in the future, and that work is at an early stage but it is underway. Just a couple of slides, just as I said, just drawing a close, which give the landscape in terms of the challenges, but the opportunity for the Community Planning Partnership to demonstrate its role as a key strategic partnership in terms of the transformation agenda, which the Council has close to its heart just now. And these issues are closely aligned to the criteria for transformation highlighted by Christie Commission in 2011. It's to recognise that in the longer term, the nature of these changes means that the outcomes we're seeking to achieve are often going to be generational. It will take time, time sequence associated to evidence how investment has hopefully led to improved outcomes for our citizens, but it will also mean that it will not necessarily, some of these initiatives will not necessarily reduce spending in the short term, and also savings might actually occur in someone else's budget. But outlined there just some of the key components required to deliver transformational change for your consideration. Very close to finishing, just one more slide. The Community Planning Partnership in terms of the transformation agenda says in the slide there, provides a place for us to restate joint priorities for the City and the Single Outcome Agreement. The community planning structures are well positioned to drive forward joint action using collective resources at the heart of community planning. We can collectively identify shared opportunities to transform public services, and there's the potential there to coordinate our approaches to community empowerment. There's a number of ideas already underway and under discussion. As I say, one of those being the collective response to community empowerment, and it's very early days, but very keen to see our transformation strategy, transformation agenda fitting neatly and complementing the work of the Community Planning Partnership. I'll finish there with a couple of just comments with regard to, we acknowledge that the ongoing need for the change to governance, some of which has been driven by legislation changes, including Community Empowerment Bill, and also some financial imperatives. So very aware that although we have structures devised and developed which we feel are robust and appropriate for use, that there's other things driving change that will probably lead to further changes in the not too distant future. I'll close there and perhaps hand back over to David.
Thank you very much, Shaw. Thank you. I'd just like to open the floor directly to questions. The first one's from Sarah Gadsden, my colleague at the Improvement Service. I'll just try and unmute you, Sarah. Hello, Sarah. I can't really hear you very clearly. Hello. I can't really hear you very clearly, so I'll just fire away with it. How did you get the buy-in from elected members of the prioritised outcomes? Were there any challenges?
No, there were remarkably few challenges, and I'd like to think that that was because of a fairly robust process that we went through. I don't think it's too much rocket science to acknowledge that, for example, Glasgow has historically had an issue with alcohol, for example, as a priority, and again, it's not too much of a mistake for all the key partners around the table to see how the misuse or unhealthy relationship with alcohol impacts on their services, be it social work, be it education, be it police, be it in terms of employment initiatives in the private sector. So I think that there was an immediate and quite early acknowledgement that in terms of the broad parameters of the issues, that we had the right issues, and some of them were frankly very, very obvious. They were key issues that were cross-cutting and that were fertile in that there was vast room for improvement. Don't know if that answers the question, so do you want to come back on
that. Does anyone have any further questions, or would you like to follow up on that, Sarah? No, Sarah says that's all, says thank you for that. Any further questions at all? It doesn't appear that there's any further questions in at the moment, so I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to deliver that today, Shaw. That was very informative. I'll just switch over to my screen quickly and I'll share a couple of useful links.
that? Thank you.
So as I mentioned at the start, this webinar series is a monthly series. We try to have at least one a month as part of the Change Managers Network in Scotland. That's a network that contains all 32 local authorities in Scotland, and the idea is to share best practice and such things. It exists largely as a knowledge hub community. So if you're willing to, if you want to join that, then please, you're more than welcome. Please search the Change Managers Network in Scotland on the Knowledge Hub. Another group that might be of interest is the Community Planning Network in Scotland. So that's another Knowledge Hub group. And as I mentioned, these are recorded sessions, so we post them all up online. For previous webinars, most of them are available on the Change Managers Network in Scotland, but they're also available on the Improvement Service website. If you click on the Change Management tab under Services, then you should be able to access all the previous webinars. Finally, if you have any inquiries or would like any information about any of these networks or the webinar series in general, then please contact myself at david.morton@improvementservice.org.uk. Finally, there will be a short survey that will follow up this webinar, and that will just ask you about what kind of things you'd like to see in the future and just go through what your viewing experience was like. So thanks again to Shaw for that. I will be in touch in the next couple of days with links on how to access the recordings, and I hope to see you at future webinars. Thank you very much.